When you think of characters like Harry Potter, Gollum, Hannibal Lecter, Katniss Everdeen, Inigo Montoya, what do those characters make you feel? That answer will tell you almost everything you need to know about writing a book with a protagonist or antagonist that readers fall in love with, an unforgettable character that makes your book sell better, get better reviews, and find a bigger readership. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to create the perfect protagonist or antagonist. And here's a hint. They have a lot of the same characteristics because that's what makes people relate to them so much. You'll also know exactly how to do those things to your character on the page. Why are certain characters universally loved or hated? What makes them so unforgettable? These kind of characters are so popular, and you can tell just by the sales of the books alone, not even counting the movies. Harry Potter sold $7.7 billion in copies of the books. The Princess Bride sold 1 million copies, and the movie did phenomenally well. The Hunger Games, 100 million copies sold. Lord of the Rings, 150 million copies sold. Silence of the Lambs sold 10 million copies. That's not even counting the billions of dollars that the movies make. Now, you and I will probably never sell 150 million copies of our books. That's really the outliers. But if you want to sell more than 10 copies or more than 100 copies, then you have to create a book that readers can't put down and that readers talk about. Those kinds of books have 4 things in common, and those 4 things generate super strong emotions within the reader. Let's talk about what those 4 are. But first, I want to mention one thing. There was a comment on one of the other videos about marketing for your books. Absolutely, marketing is important. But here's the thing, you can market a book to death, but if readers don't love it, they're not going to tell their friends, and they are not coming back for your next book. So to me, it always starts with creating a really good book. And then yes, you have to be a smart business person with your writing. But first, start with the one thing that you can absolutely control, which is how good the writing is. And that starts with a character that readers either love or despise or just have really strong feelings about. And what are those 4 characteristics? Number 1, a complicated past. I have talked about this before in other videos about characters because let's face it, people with perfect childhoods who live in white picket fences with golden retrievers, who get all A's in school and have everything handed to them on a silver platter, are not interesting people. They are people that don't grab our attention. Those are the kinds of people that we don't necessarily want to read about because it's boring. And I'm not talking about just drama, like soap opera drama, not that kind of thing. I'm talking about complicated pasts that come from fairly traumatic beginnings. Let's look at Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride. His father was literally murdered in front of him when he was a small child.
You killed my father. Prepare to die.
That's pretty traumatic, and it drives everything that he does. Now, The Princess Bride's a comedy, but yet you can have this really deep traumatic past for Inigo Montoya and make it believable and make readers love it and really root for him. He is very driven in his quest for revenge, even though he starts out trying to kill the hero of The Princess Bride, Wesley. Eventually, though, Inigo shows his good side, and the two of them band together for a common mission of eliminating the prince and the six-figured man.
I want my father back, you son of a...
Any of us who have had a loved person hurt by somebody, either evil or just kind of a jerk, can relate to that quest. We all want to see somebody who has been hurt by something that happened to somebody they love find that revenge or that closure or whatever it is that they are seeking. So that makes for a really complicated past for a character. When my son was little, he was bullied. And I got to tell you, that awoke that mama bear in me who wanted so badly to protect my son. All of us can relate to that surge of emotion that awakens inside us when somebody that we love has been hurt. And that's the kind of emotion you want to generate for your characters and your reader. You want that reader to want that character to succeed so badly because they feel that same protective love. And then the reader's going, yeah, Inigo, go get him. The second thing that these characters have in common is an impossible goal, something that it seems like they could never achieve. And yet the character is still fully committed to making it happen. Now, you as the writer, when you get to the point where they've got to achieve this goal, you may find it's impossible to figure out, but I guarantee you can figure it out. You've dropped some clues along the way from your subconscious. The impossible goal is something that a character will do whatever it takes in order to complete this goal and achieve what they want, even if they have to do the worst possible thing, like kill other people. Look at Katniss in the Hunger Games. She has a complicated past and was thrust into the role of basically being the adult in her family, particularly for her little sister. When she is thrown into the Hunger Games, There is only one winner that is possible, which gives her an impossible goal. She has to win in order to protect her family and give them the life that she's always wanted for them. But in order to do that, she has to be the only one that lives. And she's not somebody that wants to kill people. First off, she's a relatively ordinary girl. And how is she going to be able to survive among these other characters, some of whom were helped in ways that really put her at a disadvantage? And then on top of that, she has opportunities where she has to kill her fellow players. And that's not something she wants to do. So the whole time the reader is just like, what are you going to do? How are you going to survive this? How are you going to make this work? We know that the other kids in that game, kids who have families who love them, are going to do whatever it takes as well in order to achieve their goal. So the reader is feeling this emotional, complicated push-pull inside of them, wanting Katniss to win, but also not wanting to see anybody else lose. We root for her because we're connected to her, because we understand her drive to protect and care for her family. We understand the complications that she feels. We understand how she's torn between the right thing to do and the thing that she must do. We connect to her because, and here's another key, we see ourselves in her. When your reader can see themselves in your character, it makes them so much more relatable and makes them feel like this is a best friend. Let's talk about Hannibal Lecter for characters with an impossible goal. This is a man who is a cannibal, in case you haven't read the books, and his impossible goal is he wants to get out of prison to go have a nice Chianti with a person that he eats. So he is not a character whatsoever that is sympathetic, and yet he's very unique and very charming and very smart. And because of that, the reader kind of relates to him. We like how he helps Clarice. We like how he solves the mystery of the other serial killer.
Places the lotion in the basket.
And in a weird way, you kind of do want to see him get out because you're hoping maybe Hannibal Lecter has changed his ways and maybe he won't be a cannibal when he escapes prison. Of course, he is a villain, so yes, he will still be the same bad person he was when they locked him up and put that face mask on him. However, his layers, the push-pull that we as the reader feel for him is what makes us glued to the page and makes us, in a weird way, root for his impossible goal. This happens in real life all the time. Remember that prisoner who was super good looking and women all over the world were sending him letters and telling him they wanted to marry him? He was actually a pretty violent guy who had a bad past and probably wouldn't have made a good husband for any of them. But yet women fell in love with what they could see as potential in him. And so that made him somebody that people rooted for. They wanted to see him get away from the cops. In the end, he was arrested, and that was probably the best thing for society. But you can see that complicated push-pull that we have all the time in real life. And when you can put it on the page, it does wonders for your book. When you talk about impossible goals, look at Wesley in The Princess Bride. He is dead, and he still has to come back to life to rescue Buttercup. I don't think it gets any more complicated and impossible than that. And so we root for Max, the wizard, the king's wizard, to bring him back to life. And we root for him to get past the hour and to get up out of the bed and to keep living, even when it seems like he is going to have to die. Everything is making the reader just root for him and for true love to win out. We care about the poor, unrequited lover of Wesley, and we want to see him find his happily ever after. That brings me to number 3. These characters don't just have impossible goals, they will go to impossible lengths in order to achieve them. It's not something that can just be solved overnight. Like Wesley can't just walk into the castle and take Buttercup away from the prince. That's not how it's going to work. He has to do so much to get there to be reunited with Buttercup. He has to survive the dread pirate Roberts. He has to outwit the 3 men who have kidnapped Buttercup. He has to fall off a cliff. He has to get through the swamp with the rodents of unusual size. And then he has to survive the torture chamber, come back to life, band up with those other 2 guys, battle all of the prince's men, and still survive and win the day. And ride off into the sunset on a horse with her. He perseveres despite everything being against him. That's a character that we really root for and really want to see succeed. I used to do triathlons, and at my very first one, there was a woman who was, I think, 85, and she was dead last on the course, like by 20 minutes. She was way behind everybody else who had finished. But yet she persevered. Here she was, continuing to swim, bike, and run, despite the fact that she was way far from the finish line, and she was never going to win any kind of a prize. You could see that determination in her just to finish. She's out there in the Florida heat, just keeping keeping on. And so when the rest of us saw that, we lined up along the course and we cheered her across the finish line. And I got to tell you, I was just as swept up into that emotion as she was and everybody else was. We were just like, yay, she did it. And that kind of surge of group emotion is what you want your reader to feel when your character finally achieves their goal. The last thing, and something that may not work for every single plot, is giving your character an impossible choice. I've talked about this before in a previous video. Impossible choices make for incredibly gut-wrenching stories. Katniss has a moment where the little girl that is also competing in the Hunger Games is vulnerable and she could easily take her out. And this is an impossible choice. Does she take that little girl out and kill her and then get closer to winning the Hunger Games, or does she help her? And the reader wants her to kind of do both, because we want to see Katniss succeed, and yet we don't want to see this poor, vulnerable little girl die. Katniss does not kill the girl, even though it puts her position in the games at risk. She's placed in an impossible situation and does the right thing. I've also talked about something else called save the cat moments in my previous videos, and you can use a save the cat moment as an impossible choice, and that becomes a moment when the reader just falls in love with your character because they're like, oh, look at what a great thing they did, even though it cost them something. For instance, in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry sacrifices himself because he realizes he is the final Horcrux. There's also a scene in another Harry Potter book where Ron rescues himself so that Harry can survive. Those scenes are long, drawn out, full of emotion because the reader is really rooting for Harry and Ron to survive, and yet we know that if they survive, everybody else will die. So it is an impossible choice. When Harry Potter sacrifices himself against Voldemort because he is the final Horcrux, the build-up for that moment is huge, and it makes his death so much more heartbreaking. Now, if you've read the books, then you know he doesn't actually die. There's kind of a loophole in the magic that allows him to live. But up until then, the reader thinks he is going to die, and they are so invested in that. It's one of those moments that keeps the reader on the edge of their seat. So how do you make any of this work on the page? It starts with really knowing your character inside and out. You've really, truly got to know what makes them tick, what makes them anxious, what makes them insecure, what makes them scared, what matters more to them in the world than anything else. And I think a lot of writers don't do enough of this preliminary work. And I'm not talking about filling out workbooks or anything like that. You do what works for you. But you really have to know who your character is as you're writing in order to put any of these tips into play. Don't be afraid to give your characters complicated past. They need to be scarred and traumatized. They need to have these things that make the reader connect with them. Most writers are far too nice to their characters. They go, but I love them. I don't want to hurt them. I don't want to put them in a difficult situation. I don't want to give them some traumatic past. Or I'm writing a comedy. I can't do that. There are plenty of comedies. I just talked about The Princess Bride, where there is a complicated past for the characters, and yet you really root for them and you still laugh at the right moments. If you love your characters, let them bleed, let them hurt, let them go through all those things none of us want to do, and let them really come to life on the page. And then let them triumph. The triumph will be 10,000 times more powerful because you did that on the page, because you really made these characters into real people with complicated issues that the reader connects with and cares about. The reader will be jumping out of their seats so happy that the character won. So right now, take whatever characters you're working on, and I want you to layer them more than you have so far. I want you to give them at least 3 traumas in their history. This is something that I talk about in my character master plan, where they have deep emotional wounds. I want you to give them 3 traumatic moments in their history. We all have some. And I want you to think about the impact, because this is the big key that everybody misses, the impact of that trauma on the character as a person. So if somebody is abandoned on the side of the highway, how does abandonment make them feel? What does that impact, and what does that do to their future relationships with other people? A character who's orphaned reacts to things a whole lot differently than a character who grew up with 2 parents and a golden retriever. Impact is the #1 thing you need to know because it informs every single action and reaction that your character has. The impact of their past, I want to say that again, affects every single reaction and action that your character has. When I was a little girl, my dad would take me to the fair and he would show me all of the little loose bolts in the roller coasters because he used to work as a carny when he was a kid. And he would be like, that doesn't look good. That looks like it's going to fall apart. And what do you know? Big surprise, I am terrified of heights and roller coasters and fair rides. I will not go on them. Absolutely will not. I would suck it up when my kids were little, but now older in life, I do not go through that. That little trauma, and it's a baby trauma, that little trauma though, made me forever scared of things like that. And if I was a character in a book, you know what I'd do? I'd make myself get on a roller coaster because I want to get that goal so bad. So maybe my kid is at the end of the roller coaster, and so I have a really strong motivation to do it. That's what I'm talking about. What has your character gone through, and how can you use that to change their reactions and actions? Look at the beloved characters that you have. For instance, Harry Potter, he was orphaned and he's been ostracized by the family that took him in and then by the other muggles. And so that makes him more of a loner, much more self-reliant and a little reluctant to get close to people. He has trouble with trusting. He has a lot of issues that come from being an orphan and being on the outside of life for so long. But then when he does find people that understand him and love him, he becomes fiercely loyal. He will risk everything in order to protect those people. So that big trauma for him of losing his parents when he was a child has a huge impact on everything he does in every single book. Harry Potter will literally walk through fire, and in the Deathly Hallows, he will die for the people that he loves. The fact is, you gotta dig deeper, folks. You gotta try harder. You gotta look for those layers and really, really, really think about the impact and use it on the page. Everything I've talked about also works for villains as well. If you want to create a villain that the reader has complicated feelings for, that kind of want to see them work out, kind of want to see them die, then use these same techniques for that. If you look at Gollum, Gollum seems like very evil until you really get into his backstory, and then you kind of feel bad for him and everything that he has gone through in his quest to find the ring. You kind of understand him and you sort of want him to survive and thrive, but then he does bad things, so then you feel differently. But what it does is it creates a complicated relationship inside of you with the villain. Those complicated feelings that the reader has for the character makes every single scene far more powerful, unforgettable, and impactful. Again, we're back to impact. If you want more, download my character master plan right here. Watch any of these other videos that are on character or plot, and you will see how it all interlocks together and all works as one. If you use these tips, let me know in the comments below and tell me how it has transformed your book and how it has made your characters so much stronger than they were before, because that's exactly what this will do. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I will see you on the other side of the page.